Thanks so much. I'm really happy to be here. And today I'm here as both a historian, which is sort of my professional training, and also as an accidental genealogist. And the point there, sorry, let me get my clicker here. The idea here is to dig deeper for primary sources. I know that it looks a little ghoulish, and that's sort of the point. What I want to talk to you about today is about how my background as a historian really didn't prepare me for a whole bunch of other primary sources that I became involved with once I got interested in genealogy. And so that includes things like talking to strangers, going to graveyards, things like this. And I'm going to start here in primary source heaven, my idea of it anyway. The Bancroft Library at UC Berkeley, and this is where I was at grad school. And to me, when I thought primary sources, I just thought the Bancroft Library, the archives, that's what it is. And then I was teaching a course at Berkeley where I had an undergraduate class, and we assigned them research papers that had to be based entirely on primary sources. So most of the kids went off to the Bancroft, other places like that. And I did get one paper from a young woman, and it was just amazing, and it drew on the kind of primary sources I had never really considered as a historian. Things like city directories, old maps, this kind of thing. So I asked her if she'd come talk to me after class, and a very nervous, worried young undergraduate came to talk to me. I think she was worried I was going to accuse her of cheating, which I wasn't. And I said, you know, your paper is fantastic. I loved it, and I was just curious, how did you get involved in these other kinds of sources? And she looked very bashful and shy, and she said, well, my hobby is genealogy. And I said, oh, interesting. So I went to one of my professors, and I said, you know, there's this really fascinating thing going on with this student. She's doing this amazing research, and I think maybe we should try incorporating some of this genealogical research into some student projects. I think they'd be really interested. And he just got this look on his face like, please. He said, genealogists. I mean, that's like Civil War reenactors. These people aren't serious, you know. And I thought, that sucks. I thought it was really snobbish, and I thought it was really lame. And so I couldn't really do anything about it because I was just a lowly graduate student working on my dissertation, so I had to kind of shelve that for a while. But eventually I did finish my dissertation, hooray, and had a kid. Years passed, and finally I had time to actually look into genealogy. And I joined the Boulder Genealogical Society, and I started where everyone starts, with myself. That's me in the boots. I wish I still had those boots, or that they fit, maybe. That's me, my best friend Matthew. And the idea that any genealogist will tell you is the first place you start is with yourself. You try and figure out, what do I know about my own history? What do I know for sure? And so you just gather the vital records, things like your birth certificate, I got that. Social Security card, got that. Marriage certificate. Oh, what? I couldn't find my marriage certificate, and I had only been married 6 years at this point. And it was a really good place to start because genealogists often lament the sort of disorganization of their ancestors. You know, why didn't they keep anything? Why did they throw everything out? Meanwhile, I had already lost my own marriage certificate, so I knew that probably my ancestors were also not type A people. It was a good thing to know. Now, I, of course, had to start somewhere, go beyond that after that. And so I called my dad to ask him about the Jacksons, because I wanted to start with the Jacksons. It's the 20th most common surname in America, and it's not as bad as Smith, but it's pretty close in terms of genealogy. And I felt like, how am I going to separate myself from the 666,000 other people named Jackson as of the 2000 census? And when I talked to my dad, he lives in Montana and he'd grown up in Michigan, but all of the family stories seemed to start in ML, Alabama. I had never been to Alabama, but I figured I had to find out. So, of course, I started the place we all start with Google. And here's what I found, and it's hard to see, so I'll read it to you. This is really not the most auspicious start. ML, Alabama, home of the nation's largest hazardous waste landfill. That's the homeland for me. That's where I had to go. And that's the main image that comes up when you look up ML. Waste management, think green. It's population 31, very tiny, almost dead town, although they still had a working post office, so that seemed like a good place to start. So before I headed to ML, I figured I should talk to some of my living ancestors. And this is another thing that historians don't usually do. We are mostly interested in dead people. And the problem with genealogy is you actually have to talk to people who are alive, and that can often be much harder than talking to dead people. These are three of the women I talked to, beloved relatives of mine who gave me a lot of grief. The first one in the pink there is my great aunt Selma. I'm glad I started with her because, like the marriage certificate, she kind of helped me get my head in the right place about what was going on. I think I went into this feeling very proud of myself, let's say. Like, I am looking into my roots, and my relatives, my older relatives, are going to be so happy to hear from me. They're just going to be thrilled that I'm interested in their stories. And I went to go see Aunt Selma. I brought my 3-year-old son and my mother. We flew out there through a snowstorm. We got to Detroit, where she lived. She was 97 years old, and she's in really good health. She was the only relative I still had who had been born in Europe. So she was on my mom's side. And I called the night that we got there, and I said, "Hi, Aunt Selma. We're here. We're really excited to see you tomorrow." And she said, "Oh, tomorrow?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, I remember we're coming tomorrow, and I came from Colorado. My mom came from California." She goes, "No, I know. She said, "It's just that I have a hair appointment tomorrow." And I thought, okay, we've come 1,200 miles to see you, Aunt Selma. Come on. And so we finally cajoled her into postponing her hair appointment for a few hours. We did go and see her. It was great. I got a lot of good stories. But it did help me understand that I was coming with my agenda, but of course, these women had their own agenda. The next person I visited was the one in the middle, in the red, my Aunt Mary. And she's sort of the keeper of the flame of my grandparents, the Jacksons, who had passed away. And she lives in the house they lived in, and everything's kind of like a shrine to my grandparents. So I thought, this is great. She really knows everything about them. We went to see her, and we started talking, and I said, yeah, so I'd just love to talk to you about, the family history and that kind of thing. And she's looking at me, and she said, "So you're going to write a book about this?" And I said, "Well, I might. I don't know. I will have to see how it goes." And she goes, "But if you do, I'll get a cut of the proceeds, right?" And I said, first of all, she didn't understand book publishing. There are no proceeds. But I said, well, probably not. But, that's not the point. She said, okay. And we start talking. And at some point, she brought out the Bible, the family Bible. Now, that is really a gold mine, usually, for genealogists. Because a lot of people write like a family tree in the inside, or make notes about important things that happened to the family. My grandfather, her father, was a very religious man, and he had his own special Bible. She brought it off the shelf. It has Post-it notes, it's highlighted, it's annotated. I thought, this is great. People really use this Bible. And so she's showing it to me, and I'm leaning in, and she's leaning back, and I'm leaning in to look more, and she's stepping away from me. And finally, I said, Aunt Mary, I would love to just look at that Bible, and if I could, just look maybe in the inside of the front page and just see if there's anything written in there. And she kind of looks at me, and she says, "Oh, no, there's nothing like that in here." Bam, closes it, walks over to the shelf, puts it on the shelf, closes the glass door over it. That was it. I never got to look at the family Bible. I did consider breaking into her house later that night, but I decided not to. Eventually, I went down to Mississippi and visited my second cousin, Janelle. And she's a great talker. She had a lot of stories, although a lot of times she would get to a point in the story that seemed really, really tense, and she'd say, "You know what? I'm not going to tell you this part because I'm saving it for my own book about my parents called Jewels of Love." And I thought, if I have to wait until Jewels of Love gets published to find out these family stories, it is never going to happen. But, this is the point. Talking to people who are alive, who have the stories, can be just as challenging, if not more so, as tracking down records in archives. Well, I set off to Alabama with my cousin Mooner, and we went down, and one of the first places I went was the Classic Archive. This was the Julia Tutwiler Library at the University of Western Alabama, and they have an amazing local history room. That was just a godsend. We got there, there are all these books. You see these two racks, rolling racks of books and old newspapers. They had just been set there for us, with everything related to Jacksons in Sumter County, Alabama. And we looked through there, and right away, my cousin Mooner found an oral history that had been taken of my, I guess it would be my great-great aunt, a little story about how her father, my great-great-great grandfather, had been, he was a Civil War soldier. He had come home on furlough, and the Union soldiers were around, and so he had to hide. And apparently, according to the legend, the story anyway that she told, he found a giant beehive on their property, jumped in the beehive, and hid in the beehive. And as she said, the bees were a-buzzing and the Yanks were a-coming, but they never did find Pap. So that's the kind of thing you want to find, right? So I thought, okay, this is great. We took all these notes. We took photographs of this stuff. We Xeroxed like crazy. And then we decided to go to ML, and right in the middle there is the ML post office. And again, population 31, but they still do have a post office. And often it's a really good idea if you can speak to somebody like a postmaster about, local goings-on. I knew that no one in my family, or at least I thought I knew that no one in my family lived in ML anymore, but I thought I would ask. So we went in, and there's a nice man inside, and I said, hi, we're here from California and Colorado, and we're looking for, information about our family. I said, have you lived here for very long? And he goes, oh, no, ma'am. And I thought, oh, too bad, that could happen. And so we started talking to him anyway. He said, well, what are you looking for? And we just sort of told him we're trying to figure out where A, our family might be buried, and B, where the homestead was. And he said, oh, y'all talking about the Jacksons? And I said, yeah. And he goes, Isa Jackson? And that was my aunt, my great aunt, who has passed away. And I said, yeah. He goes, oh, her place just right down the street there. And I said, oh, I thought you hadn't lived here for very long, because she's been passed away for about 15 years. He said, oh, well, I grew up here. I moved to Chicago, and then I came back 2 years ago. But, okay, this is another lesson. Ask the right questions. Not how long have you lived here, but did you grow up here? Do you know this place? So he pointed it out, and there it was. Not quite Tara of Gone with the Wind, but nice little one-story ranch. And no one in our family lived there anymore, so we kind of just drove down the driveway, took some photos, moved on. This is what happened when we looked up on Google Maps about cemeteries in Sumter County, Alabama. All those little red dots are cemeteries. This is not a very big area we're looking at. It's probably about the size of Metro Denver. And what this means is that these really are cemeteries. It's just that 99% of cemeteries in this country and probably the world are not maintained. They're not actively maintained. So these are places where there was once a cemetery. There may still be a cemetery, but you've got to find it yourself. So we looked at this, Mooner and I, and thought, all right, we're going to have to do some serious research here. So we did, and we narrowed it down to something called Sumterville, Alabama Methodist Cemetery. That is where we thought we would probably find our graves, so to speak, our family's graves. And we drove around. You can see there's Mooner on the bottom trying to climb over a fence that was going to one. We did go over this fence and found nothing, but supposedly there's a cemetery down this dirt road. That's just an old abandoned house in the middle there. We finally decided, just like with the post office, we're going to have to ask someone. And again, in a place where the population is 31, there are not that many people around to ask. So we drove around these back roads for quite a while. Finally found these two guys standing out in their driveway. We told them what we were doing, and they just looked at us like we were from Mars, like, who are these girls? And we said, listen, we're just trying to find the cemetery. This is where we think it is. We showed them a printout of the Google Maps. They were like, okay. And one guy said, well, I think I know what y'all are talking about, but you're never going to find it by yourselves. And we were like, well, it's okay. If you could just give us the information, the directions. He goes, no, you're never going to find it. He said, just follow me. So they get in their truck. We follow them in our car, and we go down a muddy road that we for sure would never have even turned on our own. And we end up right there at the bottom of this driveway, and you can see right here it says private property, no trespassing. So obviously we just ignored that and walked through there, because what were we going to do? We came all the way to Alabama, And at the top of this hill, there was this abandoned cemetery. And so Mooner and I spread out, and we started casing it to see what we could find. And there was several graves that belonged to our family. Randall Jackson, that was the main one. And it says born in Virginia, 1763. That was the first I had ever heard of Virginia. So we decided to go ahead and try DNA. I got my dad tested for DNA, his DNA, which did the Jackson family line. And this showed that our earliest ancestor arrived out of Africa somewhere between 31,000 and 79,000 years ago. And if you think that's amazing, I will just tell you that that is also probably all of your ancestors as well. That guy. So thanks. A woman found me online, and she said, you know, I think I might be related to you. My husband is part of a Jackson line as well. And I said, well, I don't know that much about them. I mean, I went to Alabama, but I still don't know that much. And she said, well, have you done your DNA? And I said, yes. And she said, well, is it the haplotype I1A? And I said, yes. And she said, oh, great, then we're related. And it was true. And she ended up mailing me all of these published primary sources that are wills and land deeds and that kind of thing from colonial Virginia. And we got about 400 years of our family history emailed to us, which is awesome. So my last piece of advice is hit the jackpot. Try to hit the jackpot if you can, like I did. She ended up, this is the direct line back, and if you count in my son, that's 13 generations of Jacksons going back to the 1600s in colonial Virginia. This is the guy whose gravestone we found in ML in that abandoned cemetery. And I guess I would just end with a little quote from the actress Tilda Swinton, who won an Oscar a couple years ago, and she's from a very old family. They can date their ancestry back to the 9th century in Scotland, Clan Swinton. She was asked, what is it like to be from such an old family? And she said, you know, everyone's from an old family. Mine just wrote everything down. Thank you very much.